The war in the North was for the British to take. They had the experience, the numbers, and the ammunition. On paper, there was no way the Americans could win this battle. Thanks to their secret weapons in the North, they pushed the British south and out of the North. Woman espionage in favor of the Patriots foiled their plans in the North. Women like Sybil Ludington and Lydia Darragh undermined the British in Danbury and Philadelphia. The British were forced to find a new plan to win the war. That is when they shifted their eyes south to a land of loyalists and African American slaves. But the failure to harness the power of African American slaves and British loyalists failed them in the long run. The British lost the war to the Patriots because of women espionage and a failed plan to win the war in the South. The British had a commanding hold on the Patriots in the North. Little did the British know, America had an answer to their plans. Woman espionage foiled several key plots that would have helped the British advance in the South. One woman that helped was a girl by the name of Sybil Ludington. Sybil Ludington was a 16-year-old girl from Danbury, Connecticut, where her father, Colonel Ludington, was a commander of a militia group for General Washington during the American Revolution. One day, Colonel Ludington got a message that the British were burning down a city called Danbury. He couldn't get the word to all of his troops in time, so he had his daughter, Sybil, ride her horse in the night to warn his militia. He had Sybil tell his men to be at Colonel Ludington's house by daybreak. Sybil had to ride 40 miles to get this message to the militia and had to worry about thieves or anyone who would attack. When she arrived, she gave the warning, "The British are burning Danbury. Tell them to join my father at Ludington's mill." As the British went through the city destroying buildings and homes that didn't belong to loyalists, Sybil rode through the night, gathering every single militia soldier and told them to meet the colonel at Ludington Mill. In the morning, Colonel Ludington troops surrounded the British and defeated them in Danbury, Connecticut. Without the help of Sybil Ludington, the British would have attacked the camp and been able to progress further in the war in the South. Woman espionage played a key role in keeping the British forces from advancing forward in the war. Lydia Darragh was another woman who played an important part in the American Revolution. During the war, Washington lost the battle in her city of Philadelphia, and the British occupied half of Philadelphia. One day, British soldiers decided to use her house as a place to hold their meetings. On December 2nd, 1777, British officers held a secret meeting at the Darragh's home, ordering the family to remain in the bedrooms. But Darragh hid in a closet where she overheard their plans for a surprise December 4th attack on Washington's army at White Marsh. After hearing about this attack, Lydia walked 20 miles north to a well-known tavern in White Marsh where Patriot soldiers were supposed to be. As she warned an American officer, he told the rest of the military forces around them, and it gave the American army time to prepare before their surprise attack. The British Army returned to Philadelphia after the standoff against the American Army. Although they tried to figure out who leaked their plans, as they questioned every person there, when they got to Lydia, they didn't believe Lydia did it, and then they left the city altogether. With her spying efforts, she helped the American military be able to have a fighting chance against the British and eventually gain the important city of Philadelphia back into the hands of the Patriots. Throughout the American Revolution, the British influenced African Americans by using the language of the Revolution. The British were able to influence African Americans to join them, fight for them, and even participate in espionage. They not only offered them freedom, but also a chance to fight for their liberty. One man that offered African Americans freedom if they fought for the British was John Murray, Earl of Dunmore, in Virginia. Lord Dunmore was the last royal governor of Virginia. He gained much of his popularity in October 1774 when he led volunteers against Indians at Point Pleasant, also known as Lord Dunmore's War. At the beginning of the American Revolution, when tension between the colonies and Great Britain were high, he began to remove gunpowder from the public magazine in Williamsburg, causing his popularity and power to weaken. Once the colonists turned against him, he sent out a declaration known as Lord Dunmore's Proclamation. This was a statement against the Patriots and an invitation for slaves to join the British Army. Lord Dunmore's proclamation stated that by the power given to him by His Majesty, he will execute martial law. He also included that all indentured servants, slaves or others, would be free that were able and willing to take up arms and join the king's troops. It was successful. About 1,000 slaves escaped and joined Dunmore. He named his new army the Ethiopian Regiment. They often pointed out the hypocrisy of liberty-seeking patriots by shouting, "Liberty to slaves!" Dunmore's newly created Ethiopian Regiment and other former slaves made up the major part of the Loyalist troops. It was not just the promise of freedom that drew African Americans to the British, it was also the opportunity to fight for their liberty. One man that inspired slaves to fight for their liberty was Colonel Ty. Ty was a runaway slave from New Jersey who joined the British after escaping from his master, John Corliss. He was one of the leaders in Dunmore's army. Ty was part of an elite group of 24 black loyalists called the Black Brigade. They became a British guerrilla unit who was charged with protecting New York City. His team was responsible for conducting raids for food and fuel. Another runaway slave that joined the British was Boston King. He ran away from Charleston, South Carolina, and was also granted freedom for fighting for the British. The British influenced African Americans to fight on their side with the promise of freedom. After the Revolution ended, it was up to the British to fulfill their promise. At the end of the Revolution, the British Army, along with the African Americans that joined them, went to New York, the last port controlled by the British. The British tried to take as many of the African Americans with them when they left. They created a book called the Book of Negroes, where they logged all the names of the African Americans that fought for them and had made it to New York. As the evacuations took place, all available vessels were put into service to take the refugees to Nova Scotia, Jamaica, the Bahamas, and England. Overall, the British influenced the actions of African Americans during the American Revolution. The British strategy was exploited in the South, offering African Americans freedom, forced the hand of many people in the war who chose not to participate. The South was full of plantations and a population in which 75% of the total population were African American slaves. Hearing of the Emancipation Proclamation that was offered to the slaves, the undecided colonists in the South were angered. Through fear of a massive slave revolt, many undecided colonists turned to the Patriot side of the fight. Even the presence of the British in the South angered many backcountry farmers. British officers cruelly abused and murdered innocent colonists. At the Battle of Waxhaws, British officers brutally murdered captured American soldiers. This slaughtering of innocent patriots fueled the anti-British propaganda in the South. The undecided population often chose to support the Patriots after news about this massacre. The British were often unwelcomed into communities after this event, and led to the opposition of the British cause. This harsh treatment of Patriot soldiers attributed to the resentment to the British side. The unheard voices of the backcountry rose to the occasion and helped the Continental Army push back. From 1780 to 1782, a fierce partisan war between an ever-growing number of American patriots and a shrinking number of loyalists ensued in the South. The British went to the South assuming mass support from loyalists in the Carolinas. When the British took Charleston from the Americans, they started to put loyalists in charge. At this moment, the British found out how little support they had in the South. Many undecided colonists resented the loyalists because they saw them as self-centered gentry men. The colonists were right. The loyalists sought out their own needs when the British left them in charge. Loyalists set out to oppress the planter elite and make themselves richer. This resulted in a civil war within the South. This also forced many undecided colonists to choose the side of the Americans. They realized that there needed to be a change in power to take it away from the money-hungry loyalists and British. The hatred for the mercantilist loyalists from the people of the South forced their hand. The British were rapidly losing supporters in the South, causing this plan to use the British loyalists to help govern the southern colonies to fail. The American Revolution could have easily gone the other way. The British had their chances to put away the war in the North before they entered the South. A string of bad luck and a little help from the unexpected on the American side put the British in a hole. Women espionage undermined the British in the war in the North. Women such as Sybil Ludington and Lydia Darragh worked undercover for the Patriots and helped turn the tide in the North. The British turned to the South and had a new strategy, and this was a two-step strategy using the African American slaves against the masters and British loyalists to govern southern communities. Both of these plans failed. The British lost the war in the South because of the inability to close out the war in the North, the lack of support from British loyalists, and the failure to win over the majority of African American slaves in the South.